Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. So I'm just out in the Canadian wilderness right now. I recently picked up this new Seiko SLA023. This is the latest version of the Marine Master 300. It's actually a watch that I've been meaning to get for a while because some of the other Seiko divers, even the Marine Master 200s and reissues, kind of have some drawbacks. So you guys probably know I've cut my teeth on a lot of Seiko divers in the past. And because of the new divers ISO requirements, Seiko has started doing this thing where they added an actual loomed marker by the date at the 3 o'clock, which happens to be the case for this watch as well. But yeah, I think it's a significant upgrade, mainly for a few reasons. First and foremost, you do have a high beat movement in this watch. This is the 8L35. It's basically an undecorated, unregulated Grand Seiko movement made in the same facility as Grand Seiko's. You know, this case has Zuratsu polishing and a monoblock case on it. And it's also got a partially loomed ceramic bezel insert. And you don't see that too often in a lot of Seiko divers. So why don't we flip perspectives and I'll actually show you guys this watch up close in the studio. So now that we're in the studio, I wanted to give you my take on the Seiko Marine Master SLA023. When you purchase the watch, you can see that it comes with a Seiko silicone rubber strap, and the default configuration, the watch head does come supplied with this Seiko Marine Master bracelet, which I would actually say is one of the most underappreciated or hated bracelets in the marketplace. And that's just because 99% of the owners I know immediately swap this out for a different bracelet option, and in fact I currently have it on a strap code hex head bracelet. All that being said, I don't think the bracelet itself is that bad. It's finished quite well. I just find that the links themselves are quite long. They don't articulate as well. And the clasp is also excessively long, mainly on the underside, but it does have that added benefit of the toolless ratcheting micro extension. So if you're going to use this watch for its intended purpose of saturation diving, and you're like going to throw this over a wetsuit, then by all means, this bracelet is built to task. But let's be real, guys. Who buys these Seiko divers to take in the water anymore? So here's how I wear this Seiko SLA023. I do have it on this hex head strap code bracelet. You can just see how thick the individual links are. They're a lot shorter, as is the clasp itself, and it's a little bit weighty, but this does actually balance out the head of the watch itself, which is a little top heavy. Here's a quick wrist shot, just to show you how the strap code hex head bracelet pairs up with the MM300 on my 7.5-inch wrist. That's 19 centimeters in circumference if you're going to use the metric system. Now the heft of this watch is noticeable. The combination of this bracelet and watch head is 220 grams. That might scare you, but I can assure you it's quite comfortable and it is well balanced. All that being said, if you want to lower the weight of the watch, throw it on a rubber strap. That's another good option, and it also keeps the watch quite securely planted on your wrist and is suitable for more long-term wearing experiences. All right, so say you got a smaller wrist. The dimensions I threw out earlier might scare you with respect to the weight and it being top heavy, but visually this watch wears much smaller than the stated dimensions. For example, on the right hand side here, this is my Tudor Black Bay GMT. It's a 42mm dive watch, and visually I think it looks a little bit bigger than the Seiko MM300 here. The case diameter for the MM300, I measure at about 43.6 millimeters to my calipers. Flipping both watches to the side, the Seiko MM300 is a bit thicker, coming in at 15.6 millimeters, but it hides the thickness well because you can see the case is broken up between the underside, the mid case, the top portion of the case, and a really thick bezel insert. Meanwhile, the Tudor Black Bay GMT comes in at just under 15 millimeters, but it's very slab-sided, and there's not much differentiating the mid case with everything else. Now, the lug-to-lug distance is actually quite similar between both watches too. So from north to south, the length is 50 millimeters, and when it comes to the lug opening for the supplied bracelet, the Seiko actually has a narrow 20 millimeter lug gap here, whereas the Tudor has a 22 millimeter lug opening. And the last visual trick that Seiko plays is having a relatively small dial area with respect to the case and bezel. So the actual dial where the sapphire crystal sits is only 30 millimeters. So in many respects, it's kind of like a Doxa diver that has a 30 millimeter dial size and then a fairly large bezel and bellied out case portion. Now I like that Seiko upgraded these Marine Masters with the sapphire crystal that has nice anti-reflective treatment on the underside. This sunray blue color on the dial is probably my favorite out of any Seiko diver currently. So let's talk about the dial features that I really like. For one, the finishing is phenomenal. If you just look at the hand stack, the hour and minute hand are broad sword style hands, deep filled with Seiko's Lumibright loom, but the brushing on them and the finishing is quite spectacular. And the seconds hand has nice contrast because it's kind of a gold colored seconds hand that has kind of one of those stoplight loom plots as the seconds hand extends all the way to the rehaut or chapter ring, which is raised above the dial, and the alignment for that is quite nice. Another nice touch is the font that they used for the printing. The printed Seiko text just below the 12 o'clock position is very crisp, and I like that font choice. And even the font on the day of the month on the date disc is kind of cool, and it's a little different than you would find from, say, a lot of Swiss dive watch manufacturers. Each of the hour indices appear to be applied and have nice silver surrounds on them. Very even and potent application of loom to these markers too. And then if you move away from the dial and look at the blue ceramic bezel insert, I love the font choice. It's oversized, and that triangle at the 12 o'clock position for orientation is very prominent and loom filled. As is the first 20-minute hash mark graduations. There's loom there, which is kind of an interesting choice, and the size of the bezel makes it very easy to grip even with gloved hands. It's a very nice coin edge bezel with 120 clicks that turn unidirectionally, and it's a little tighter than most other lower tier Seiko divers. You don't get that dampened or muted feel. The clicks are actually quite precise. Now if we also consider the case finishing, I think Seiko knocked it out of the park here because it really does break up the layers to the case. On the very bottom is actually a monocoque case, so there's actually not a case back you can unscrew. This helps with the 300 meter water rating and also makes it suitable for saturation diving because one of the rate limiting steps for helium ingressing into a case is through the case back, which it cannot penetrate on the underside here. On the mid case, you have a very fine and precise brushing, and that terminates at drilled lug holes on either side of the watch head, which is very nice for quick strap changes. The crown is offset at the 4 o'clock position. It's a nice size at 6.75 millimeters, signed with the Prospex X logo and knurled quite well. The automatic movement is a lot better than, say, some of the other lower tier Seiko diver movements, like the 6R or 4R series movements, which have very large tolerances and different positional regulation as reported by a lot of owners. Anecdotally, this watch is insanely accurate, only picking up about 2 or 3 seconds per day on my time grapher, with a very healthy amplitude and no beat error to speak of. I do wish that Seiko utilized this type of movement with the 4 Hz sweep in more of their divers. It does seem fairly exclusive. And you get about a 50-hour power reserve with the 8L35 here, as well as 26 joules and hacking and hand winding capabilities. So before wrapping up the video, I do like to discuss any points for improvements or negative elements. The first one I discuss is the price. This comes in with a suggested MSRP of $3,895 Canadian dollars. Now, if you ask your AD really nicely, they'll probably give you a bit of a discount, And of course, this watch is a lot more affordable on the gray market or secondary market. As a whole, I'm just a little disheartened that you have to spend this kind of money to eliminate a lot of QC issues that are plaguing lower tier Seiko divers, like misalignment on the indices of a chapter ring or the bezel, or just the really poor tolerances people report in other automatic movements. And lastly, going back to the diver's ISO 6425 compliance with the date window, the date cutout is a little bit small and sunken into the dial, so I do find actually reading the date a little bit challenging on this particular diver. But as always guys, I also love to hear your feedback and comments in the description section of this video. What are your thoughts on the recent Seiko Marine Master 300s, and would you consider picking one up? Now, if you do enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. It helps me out a ton. And as always, I can't wait to catch you guys in the next video.